What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you come into the channel. Check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to speak on some recent audio I ran across. This was Tim Hardaway Sr. And Tim Hardaway Sr. He was on All the Smoke podcast with Matt Barnes and the Jackson dude. What's the guy named Jackson? I don't know why I can't remember his name. But he was on All the Smoke, right? And Tim Hardaway was talking about Chris Mullins and how good Chris Mullins was. And people, people don't I don't know if people really underestimate or he don't get enough credit Chris Mullins do for how nice he was. But I remember watching Chris Mullins when he was at St. John's in the Big East, right? And man, this dude was this guy, Chris Mullins was bad, right? St. John's, when they was in the Big East, used to give Georgetown fits, man. Georgetown, Providence, Villanova, he was a bad man. And so when Tim Hardaway was talking about it, just reminded me how Chris Mullins and what's the other guy that used to play at St. John's? I think Walter Berry. And both of these guys was left-handed. And they, Chris Mullins, Walter Berry, man, they was bad, Jack. And so I want to listen to the audio of what Tim Hardaway said about Chris Mullins, because Chris Mullins wasn't no joke. And hold on, let me get this here.
People think I'm lying, but we never had social media. And when I say I didn't seen Chris Mullin make 100 threes in a row, I didn't seen him make 100 threes in a row. And people be like, "Oh, you lying." I didn't see my man go for 2.5 hours and did not miss. I always said this. He was a 2-time Big East Player of the Year. And then we was with somebody and I said that, and then Mullin went like this. Three. 3-time Big East Player of the Year.
That's when the Big East was it too.
He was Chris Mullin was putting in that work. In the Big East in the 80s, from the late 70s to like the mid 90s. Well, when he played, the Big East was it. I mean, that was some tough, competitive Georgetown, Syracuse, St. John's, Providence, Villanova, UConn. Man, them was some tough team. And Chris Mullins was that dude. Like I said, he was that dude when they he was that dude when the league was tough. 3-time Player of the Year. And you had Patrick Ewing played during that time. I remember Georgetown had David Wingate. David Wingate played. Syracuse had some loaded teams. Man, who they had down? Was it Pearl Washington was over at Syracuse, man? The other guy used to like at Syracuse. Now I think Stevie Jackson or something like that, jump out the gym. Man, those teams, what was it? Villanova had Pinckney, Ed Pinckney and all those guys. That Big East conference, man, that Big East just was terrible. It was terrible. And Chris Mullins, man, was putting in work. I never felt like, I never felt like Chris Mullin was hype or, they was pumping him up because you had to, you had to really buckle down and play hard when you played against this guy, man, because he was going to give it to you. No way was he hype. You couldn't hype him in that Big East league. You just couldn't be hype or you couldn't be fraudulent because you would get exposed, and so for this guy to be able to do what he did in that Big East when the Big East was it, the Big East and that ACC conference, where you got North Carolina and Duke. Those were the two toughest in my you know, in my opinion, those are two conferences. And I used to like those conferences going at each other. But yeah, Chris Mullins was that dude. You know, he was that dude. And then so when Chris Mullins moved on to the next level, he went to Golden State, you know, and he wound up having an excellent career, in my opinion, at Golden State. Chris Mullins was tough, man. He was one of them New York. He was one of them New York City dudes too. You know, he was just like one of those guys who from New York City who just was just like headstrong, mentally tough, you know, confidence. You know, New York City dudes always some of them a little bit too confident, over cocky, but you know, Chris Mullin was the real deal, no doubt, man. And so, man, you know, he had some epic battles with Georgetown. I remember St. John's and Georgetown. That's when Georgetown was, you know, they was in the thick of things too. So those, I don't, in my opinion, and you know, I just think that college basketball at that time, probably to me, and that's probably, you know, me just being, you know, nostalgic, but I thought that's when you got the best. That style of basketball that they played in college back then was just, in my opinion, was just the best. It was just so tough. You know, he had a lot of tough, and Chris Mullins was one of them. A lot of tough ball players, and Chris Mullins was one of them, man. Shoot. And I'm sure if you ask anybody who played against Chris Mullins during that time, throughout his career, not just that time, but Chris Mullins, he was just a nightmare, and can shoot the lights out. He could shoot, and he could put the ball on the you know, put the ball on the ground and get around you. So you know, you wasn't going to just limit him to his jumper. You know, some teams said, "Well, I'm gonna press up on him and you know and make him put the ball on the floor." You know, but he could score going to the rim. You know, Georgetown. I remember Georgetown. They had to play a boxing one on Chris Mullin. They put David Wingate had to shadow Chris Mullins all over the floor. Everybody else played a zone. And then if Chris Mullins got past David Wingate, then he had, you know, then they had Pat Ewing in the paint to clean it up. That's the only way Georgetown beat St. John's, man. If you don't have Pat Ewing back there and you don't have David Wingate trying to deny him the ball, that game, George, and this was I think that was the year that Georgetown went and won it all when they had David Wingate. Reggie Williams, I think, was a freshman that year at Georgetown. And yeah, man. They had to go boxing one on Chris Mullins to stop Chris Mullin. So yeah, man. Chris Mullin was that deal. But yeah, so that's my take on it. Make sure to like and subscribe. With that being said, also don't forget to leave a comment, and I will check you all out in the next video. Peace.